The holographic star map flickered in the center of the Zephyrian High Council chamber, each conquered system pulsing with a satisfied green glow. Commander Valtex stood before it like a proud parent showing off baby pictures, his four arms gesticulating wildly as he pointed to yet another fallen civilization. 47 systems, honored counselors, Valtex announced, his chest plates inflating with pride. 47. The Andromedans lasted 3 cycles before begging for mercy. The Centauri Federation, 2 cycles. And don't get me started on the Regalians, they surrendered before we even finished charging our plasma cannons. Counselor Nexus, a particularly pompous specimen even by Zephyrian standards, leaned back in his floating chair and chuckled. The sound resembled a dying air filtration unit. Ah yes, the Regalians. Didn't they send us a formal apology along with their surrender documents? Indeed they did, Valtex beamed. Apparently they were sorry for wasting our valuable time with their existence. The chamber erupted in what passed for laughter among the Zephyrian elite, a series of clicks, hisses and grinding sounds that would have sent any sensible species running for the nearest exit. Admiral Korath, whose battle scars made him look like he'd been used as a chew toy by a particularly aggressive space kraken, raised one of his 6 claws. "Commander, if I may," Korath wheezed, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd personally obliterated more solar systems than most beings could count. "What's our next target? Surely we're not running out of civilizations to educate." Valtex's eyes, all 8 of them, gleamed with malicious delight. "Ah, Admiral, I'm so glad you asked." He manipulated the hologram, zooming in on a small blue-green planet orbiting an unremarkable yellow star. "Behold, our next conquest, the human colony of Nexus 7. Dr. Zenwick, the Council's chief xenobiologist, nearly choked on his nutrient cube. "Humans? Those primitive bipeds who still use projectile weapons?" "The very same," Valtex confirmed with glee. "Their entire defensive fleet consists of 12 obsolete cruisers and what they laughably call a battleship. I've seen cargo haulers with better armament." Counselor Nexus wiped tears of mirth from his optical sensors. "Humans? Oh, this is rich. Didn't our intelligence reports say they still engage in hand-to-hand combat with metal blades?" "Swords, I believe they call them," Dr. Zenwick added, consulting his datapad. "Apparently, they consider it honorable. How quaint, how primitive." Admiral Korath's mandibles clicked in amusement. "Honorable combat. What's next? Are they going to challenge us to a dance-off?" The laughter reached new heights of xenophobic glee. Commander Valtex basked in it like a reptile under a heat lamp, clearly enjoying his role as the evening's entertainment. "The best part," Valtex continued, raising his voice over the cacophony, "is that they've actually issued what they call a diplomatic protests regarding our expansion into their territory. They're demanding we respect their sovereignty." "Their sovereignty?" Nexus gasped between fits of laughter. "A species that hasn't even mastered faster-than-light travel wants to dictate terms to the Zephyrian Empire." Dr. Zenwick shook his bulbous head in mock sympathy. "Poor little humans. They probably think their primitive weapons and outdated tactics will somehow save them. It's almost sad, really." "Almost," Admiral Korath agreed, then paused dramatically. "So tell me, Commander, when do we begin this, how shall I put it, educational demonstration?" Valtex consulted his chronometer with theatrical flair. "The fleet departs in 6 standard cycles. We should have Nexus 7 pacified before the next council meeting. In fact, I'm so confident in our success that I'm willing to make a wager." "Oh?" Counselor Nexus leaned forward, intrigued. "I bet the entire human resistance collapses within the first cycle of orbital bombardment. Their species is known for its emotional instability. They'll probably surrender the moment they see our ships." The council members exchanged knowing glances, their confidence radiating through the chamber like a toxic gas leak. Admiral Korath raised his claw in a mock toast. To another effortless victory then. After all, he paused, his scarred features twisting into what might generously be called a smile. Who could possibly stop us? The question hung in the air like a bad omen, though none of them were wise enough to recognize it as such. The laughter was still echoing through the council chamber when the first alarm chimed. A soft, polite little sound that barely registered above the Zephyrian celebration of their own superiority. Commander Valtex paused mid-gesture, one of his 4 arms still pointing at the holographic display of Nexus 7. What was that? Councillor Nexus asked, his optical sensors dimming slightly. Before anyone could answer, the alarm chimed again. Then it decided to abandon all pretense of politeness and launched into a full-scale electronic tantrum that would have made a Banshee jealous. Security breach in Docking Bay 7, announced the station's AI in a tone that suggested it was personally offended by the intrusion. All personnel report to battle stations. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is definitely, absolutely, 100% not a drill. Admiral Korath's battle-scarred features twisted into a frown. Docking Bay 7. That's where we keep the captured enemy vessels. Probably just some malfunction with those primitive human ships we acquired. The chamber's massive doors hissed open, and Security Chief Blixen stumbled in, his usually pristine uniform looking like he'd been wrestling with a particularly aggressive asteroid field. His 3 eyes darted nervously between the council members. Honored councillors, he wheezed, we have a situation. Situation. Dr. Zenwick raised what passed for an eyebrow among his species. Chief, you look like you've seen a ghost. Worse, Blixen replied, his voice cracking like an adolescent's. I've seen a human. The council chamber fell silent. Then Councillor Nexus burst into renewed laughter. A human? One human has you this rattled. Chief, perhaps it's time to consider early retirement. You don't understand, Blixen insisted, his panic rising like floodwater in a basement. This human she's what? Commander Valtex demanded, his patience wearing thinner than atmosphere on a breached hull. She's walking through our corridors, Blixen managed to stammer. Alone, with a plasma rifle, and she's humming. Admiral Korath's mandibles clicked dismissively. Humming? Oh, the horror. Alert the medical bay. We may need treatment for musical trauma. But Blixen wasn't finished. Sir, she's already been through docking bays 4 through 7. Our sensors show 37 of our elite guards are incapacitated. Incapacitated? Dr. Zenwick leaned forward, suddenly interested. You mean unconscious? I mean scattered across 3 bulkheads like abstract art. Blixen replied, his voice barely above a whisper. The laughter died faster than a hyperdrive with a blown motivator. Commander Valtex straightened, his chest plates deflating slightly. Chief, are you telling me that one primitive human female has fought her way through 37 of our best soldiers? Actually, Blixen consulted his datapad with trembling claws. It's 42 now, she just passed checkpoint 9. Councillor Nexus waved dismissively, though his gesture lacked its earlier confidence. Impossible. Human weapons can barely scratch our armor plating. Their physiology is inferior in every measurable way. Tell that to Sergeant Krex, Blixen muttered, or what's left of him. The council members exchanged glances that were significantly less confident than they'd been 5 minutes ago. Admiral Korath activated his personal communicator with one claw, while the others drummed nervously against his chair. Security station. This is Admiral Korath. Status report on the disturbance. The response came through with the clarity of someone speaking through a mouthful of gravel. Sir, she's at checkpoint 12 now. We've lost visual contact with squads, 7 through 11. Last we heard was screaming, and something that sounded like, Sir, this is going to sound crazy, but it sounded like laughing. Laughing? Commander Valtex's voice cracked slightly. The human is laughing. No, sir, the security officer corrected. The laughing was coming from our troops, right before the screaming stopped. Dr. Zenwick was furiously tapping at his datapad, his optical sensors wide with something approaching panic. This doesn't make sense. According to all our intelligence, humans are emotionally unstable, technologically primitive, and physically inferior. Maybe your intelligence was wrong, Blixen suggested, then immediately regretted speaking when 8 pairs of alien eyes focused on him with laser-like intensity. The lights in the chamber flickered once, twice. Then they stabilized, but everyone noticed the brief moment of darkness. Admiral Korath's communicator crackled to life again. "Sir, she's reached the command level. I repeat, the intruder has reached the command level. She's approximately 50 meters from the council chamber. And what?" Korath demanded. "Sir, she just asked one of our guards for directions. To quote her exact words, 'Excuse me, could you point me toward the pompous jerks in charge? I have some business to discuss.'" The chamber fell silent, except for the low hum of life support systems and the increasingly rapid breathing of several very nervous aliens. Commander Valtex opened his mouth to speak, but was interrupted by a new sound echoing through the corridors. Footsteps. Human footsteps. Getting closer. Counselor Nexus swallowed hard, his earlier bravado evaporating like moisture in hard vacuum. "Perhaps we should consider diplomatic solutions." The massive doors to the council chamber exploded inward with a sound like thunder having a particularly bad day. Through the smoke and debris stepped a figure that would haunt Zephyrian nightmares for generations to come. Captain Elena Blackwood stood in the doorway, her combat boots dripping with what was unmistakably alien blood. Her plasma rifle was still smoking in her hands, and her face wore an expression that suggested she'd been having the time of her life. A few pieces of Zephyrian armor plating fell from her shoulders as she stepped into the chamber. She looked around at the assembled council members, took in their expressions of shock and terror, and smiled. Well, she said, her voice carrying the kind of cheerful menace usually reserved for debt collectors and tax auditors. "I believe someone just asked, who could possibly stop us?" Elena stepped fully into the chamber, her boots squelching slightly on the polished floor. The sound echoed in the stunned silence like a metronome counting down to Judgment Day. She casually kicked a piece of door debris aside and surveyed the assembled alien leadership with the expression of someone who'd just walked into a particularly disappointing restaurant. "Sorry about the door," she said, not sounding sorry at all. "I did knock, but your doorman seemed to have a severe case of unconsciousness. Very rude, really. Where I come from, we call that poor hospitality." Commander Valtex's forearms were frozen mid-gesture, his mouth opening and closing like a fish experiencing sudden atmospheric decompression. Admiral Korath had gone so still, he might have been mistaken for a particularly ugly statue. Zenwick was frantically tapping his data pad, as if somehow the right sequence of button presses might make this nightmare disappear. Only Counselor Nexus managed to find his voice, though it came out as more of a squeak than the authoritative boom he was known for. You're human. Gold star for observation, pointy ears," Elena replied, shifting her grip on the plasma rifle. "And you're the bunch of oversized insects who've been playing Galactic bully. Charming setup you've got here. Very evil overlord meets corporate boardroom. I like what you've done with the place." She gestured around the chamber with her free hand, taking in the ostentatious displays of conquered worlds, and the pompous architecture designed to intimidate lesser species. "Though I have to say, the whole floating chairs thing is a bit much. What's next?" Ominous lightning effects. As if on cue, the chamber's emergency lighting flickered, casting dramatic shadows across Elena's blood-spattered form. She raised an eyebrow. "Well, that's convenient." Admiral Korath finally found his voice, though it emerged as a harsh rasp. "Impossible. Our intelligence reports stated that the human fleet at Nexus 7 was destroyed. 3 of our finest battle cruisers obliterated your pathetic defenses." Elena's smile widened, and somehow that made her infinitely more terrifying. "Oh, those 3 battle cruisers. Yeah, funny story about that." She settled into a more comfortable stance, like someone preparing to tell an amusing anecdote at a dinner party. Except the dinner party was in a war council chamber, and she was holding a weapon that could vaporize small buildings. "See, your boys did a real number on our orbital platforms. Very impressive light show. Lots of explosions. My compliments to your pyrotechnics department. She paused, her expression growing thoughtful. But here's the thing about humans that apparently didn't make it into your intelligence briefings. We're spectacularly bad at staying dead when we're supposed to. Dr. Zenwick looked up from his frantic datapad consultation. The reports confirmed total annihilation of human forces. Sensor sweeps detected no survivors. Sensor sweeps, Elena repeated, chuckling. Right. Tell me, Doc, did those sweeps account for someone hiding in the wreckage of their own ship, breathing recycled air through a jury-rigged life support system for 6 hours while plotting creative revenge? The silence that followed was so complete it seemed to have physical weight. Didn't think so, Elena continued conversationally. See, while your crews were celebrating and taking trophy haulers, I was busy hot-wiring a maintenance shuttle and paying visits to each of your battle cruisers. Started with the Decimator. Lovely ship, terrible security. Then the Annihilator. Seriously, who names these things? Finally finished with the, what was the third one called? Oh right, the Inevitable Victory. She snorted. That one aged poorly. Commander Valtex's chest plates were vibrating with barely controlled panic. 3 battle cruisers. Our most elite forces, thousands of warriors. Had Elena corrected. Past tense. And I hate to break it to you, Valtex. Can I call you Valtex? But elite might be overselling it. Your security protocols have more holes than a meteor-damaged hull, and your troops have the tactical awareness of sedated livestock. Counselor Nexus was slowly backing toward what he probably hoped was an inconspicuous exit. Elena noticed the movement and teased disapprovingly. Now, Counselor. No need to leave just when things are getting interesting. Besides, we haven't even gotten to the best part yet. What best part? Dr. Zenwick whispered, though he clearly didn't want to know the answer. Elena's grin turned absolutely predatory. The part where I explain why everything you think you know about humans is spectacularly hilariously wrong. She gestured with her rifle toward the holographic display still showing Nexus 7. You see this planet? You called it insignificant. A minor human colony. Easy pickings. Admiral Korath nodded slowly, as if any sudden movements might trigger some kind of explosive response. Wrong again, Elena continued cheerfully. Nexus 7 isn't just any colony, it's a training facility. For human special forces, every single civilian on that planet has military experience. The grocery store clerks are former commandos. The kindergarten teachers are retired demolitions experts. The guy who runs the ice cream shop held the record for longest solo deep space reconnaissance mission. The color was draining from various alien faces in shades ranging from pale green to sickly purple. So when you obliterated our defenses, Elena made air quotes with her free hand, what you actually did was really annoy about 50,000 trained killers who were trying to enjoy their retirement. Dr. Zenwick dropped his datapad. The clatter echoed like a gunshot in the silent chamber. But here's the thing that's really going to bake your carapaces, Elena continued, warming to her subject. All those human weaknesses you love to mock, our emotional instability, our primitive honor codes, our stubborn refusal to surrender when any sensible species would run. She paused for dramatic effect, letting the tension build like pressure in a failing containment field. Those aren't weaknesses, gentlemen. Those are features. Commander Valtex finally managed to speak, though his voice cracked like thin ice. Oh yes. Elena nodded enthusiastically. See, emotional instability means we do completely unpredictable things that mess up your neat little tactical algorithms. Honor codes mean we keep fighting when your computer models say we should quit. And our stubborn refusal to surrender. She raised the plasma rifle slightly, not quite pointing it at anyone in particular, but making sure everyone noticed it was there. Well, that means when you ask who could possibly stop us, someone like me shows up to provide a very personal, very detailed answer. The assembled council members stared at her in the kind of silence usually reserved for funerals or tax audits. Melna looked around at their shocked expressions and sighed theatrically. You know, for a supposedly superior species, you folks really need to work on your threat assessment protocols. Elena reached into her combat vest and pulled out a small device that looked disturbingly familiar to the assembled aliens. Dr. Zenwick's optical sensors widened in recognition. "That's a Zephyrian memory core," he stammered. "Where did you get that?" "Funny you should ask," Elena replied, tossing the device casually in her palm like it was a coin. "I pulled this little beauty from the databanks of your battle cruiser Annihilator, right after I finished redecorating the bridge with your former crew. Fascinating reading material, really. Who knew genocidal maniacs kept such detailed records?" She activated the device, and holographic images began projecting above the council table. The first image showed a peaceful human settlement, families walking through tree-lined streets, children playing in parks, elderly couples sitting on porches watching the sunset. "Colony designation, Haven's Rest," Elena narrated, her voice taking on the tone of a particularly sadistic tour guide. "Population, 43,000. Average age 35 standard years. Primary industries, agriculture and education." The image shifted, showing the same settlement from orbit. "Duration of attack 14 minutes, Elena continued, her casual tone making the horror somehow worse. "Survivors, 0. Reason for attack according to your own logs. Territory expansion exercise." Commander Valtex's chest plates had gone completely flat against his torso. That was a strategic necessity. The colony was in a vital shipping lane. "Strategic necessity," Elena repeated, her smile never wavering. "Right, next image." Another peaceful world appeared in the hologram. This one showed families at a harvest festival, children wearing flower crowns, elderly humans teaching youngsters traditional dances. "Greenfield Colony," Elena announced. "Population, 78,000. They specialized in medical research. Their main export was cancer treatments that worked on 14 different species. The orbital bombardment footage was even more brutal this time. Duration 9 minutes. Your efficiency was improving. Survivor 0. Reason for attack. Potential threat to imperial interests. Apparently curing cancer threatens imperial interests. Now, who knew? Admiral Korath was gripping his chair so hard his claws were leaving gouges in the metal. "You cannot judge military decisions without understanding the broader strategic picture." "Oh, I understand the picture perfectly," Elena said, advancing the hologram to the next image. "But we haven't gotten to my personal favorite yet." The new image showed a world Elena clearly recognized intimately. Her expression softened slightly, as the hologram displayed a bustling city with architecture that seamlessly blended advanced technology with natural beauty. Gardens grew on rooftops, children attended classes in open-air schools, and elderly humans sat in circles sharing stories with fascinated younger generations. "Nexus 7, she said quietly. "My home." The chamber fell dead silent. Even the environmental systems seemed to hold their breath. "Population, 52,843. Elena continued, her voice steady despite the pain flickering in her eyes. "That number included my grandmother, who taught xenobiology at the university. My little sister who was studying to be a diplomat. My neighbor's kid, who wanted to be a spaceship pilot when he grew up." The hologram showed the attack footage. This time Elena didn't look away. "Duration 47 minutes. You took your time with this one. Really savored it. Reason for attack." She paused, checking the data. Quote, "Demonstration of imperial might to discourage human expansion." Dr. Zenwick was frantically calculating something on his backup data pad. "But that would mean you're the only survivor of Nexus 7, Elena confirmed. "Congratulations, Doc. You win the math prize. Unfortunately, the prize is me being really unhappy with your entire species." Counselor Nexus had been slowly edging toward the emergency communications panel, but Elena noticed the movement and casually shifted the rifle in his direction. "I wouldn't," she advised cheerfully. "See." Here's where things get really interesting for you folks. All this time you've been operating under the assumption that humans are scattered, disorganized, and easily intimidated. She gestured toward the data core. But your own intelligence files, the ones you apparently never bothered reading, tell a very different story. Did you know that humanity has a concept called mutually assured destruction? It's delightfully simple. You hurt us badly enough, and we hurt you back so thoroughly that winning becomes indistinguishable from losing. Admiral Karath's mandibles were clicking rapidly, a sure sign of extreme agitation among his species. You're bluffing. Humans lack the technological capability for effective retaliation. Elena's laugh was genuinely delighted. Oh, Admiral. Sweet, naive, soon-to-be extinct Admiral. You've been making the classic mistake of judging human technology by human aesthetics. She pulled up another holographic display, this one showing what appeared to be crude, boxy human spacecraft. These look primitive to you, don't they? All those right angles and exposed components, very unsophisticated. The aliens nodded eagerly, grasping at this familiar superiority. Wrong again, Elena said with obvious glee. See, we build them ugly because we build them functional. While you're wasting time on sleek curves and intimidating paint jobs, we're cramming every cubic meter with weapons, armor, and really unpleasant surprises. Commander Valtex was beginning to hyperventilate, which was quite a sight given his respiratory system. Even if that were true, you lack the numbers for effective. About that, Elena interrupted, checking what appeared to be a standard chronometer on her wrist. Computer, patch me through to Fleet Admiral Chen. The chamber's communication system activated, without any input from the Zephyrian Council members. A gruff human voice filled the room. Elena, you there? We're in position, and ready to turn this oversized tin can into an abstract art installation. Thanks, Marcus, Elena replied conversationally. How many ships did we bring to this party? Current count 437 vessels. We've got their station completely surrounded. Nice job with the distraction, by the way. Half their defense platforms are pointing the wrong direction. Dr. Zenwick dropped his backup data pad. This one shattered when it hit the floor. 400, Commander Valtex whispered. 37, Elena finished helpfully. Plus supporting craft. Turns out when you murder entire human worlds, the survivors get together and have very serious discussions about appropriate responses. She turned back to the council members, who were now looking at each other with expressions that suggested they were seriously reconsidering their career choices. So here's how this works, Elena announced, settling into what had been Councillor Nexus's chair before he'd started his unsuccessful escape attempt. You have exactly 10 minutes to order the complete withdrawal of all Zephyrian forces from human territory. You will also provide full reparations for the colonies you destroyed, surrender all war criminals for trial, and officially apologize for being genocidal idiots. And if we refuse, Admiral Korath asked, though his voice suggested he already knew the answer. Elena's smile returned in full force. Then Admiral Chen and I conduct a very practical demonstration of why underestimating humans is hazardous to your continued existence. Your choice, gentlemen. Surrender with dignity, or surrender as component atoms. The council chamber fell silent, except for the sound of very powerful aliens contemplating very unpleasant futures. Tick-tock, Elena added helpfully. The silence stretched for exactly 37 seconds before Commander Valtex's resolve cracked like cheap armor plating under sustained fire. His forearms began trembling simultaneously, creating a pathetic display that would have been comical under different circumstances. We surrender, he whispered, the words escaping his throat like air from a punctured hull. Complete and unconditional surrender. Louder, Elena suggested helpfully, cupping her ear with exaggerated concern. I don't think Admiral Chen heard you up there. Marcus, did you catch that? The human admiral's voice crackled through the comm system with barely contained amusement. Negative, Elena. Sounded like squeaking. Maybe they need to clear their breathing apparatus? Admiral Korath shot a venomous glare at his fellow council members before stepping forward. The Zephyrian Empire formally surrenders to human forces, he announced in a voice that sounded like grinding metal. We accept all terms and conditions of capitulation. Excellent. Elena beamed, clapping her hands together like a delighted child. See how easy that was? All that galactic conquest nonsense, and it turns out a simple conversation was all we needed. Dr. Zenwick was frantically updating his data files, muttering calculations under his breath. Impossible probability matrices. Human tactical efficiency exceeds all projections by factors of... Doc, Elena interrupted gently. Maybe spend less time on the math and more time on updating those intelligence reports. Might save your species some embarrassment next time. Counselor Nexus, who had been cowering behind his chair, finally found the courage to speak. What happens now, to the Empire? To us. Elena pretended to consider this deeply, tapping her finger against her chin. Well, that depends. Are you planning to behave yourselves from now on? Or do I need to leave Admiral Chen's fleet parked in your front yard as a permanent reminder? The council members exchanged glances that spoke volumes about their newfound respect for human diplomatic techniques. We will comply with all human directives, Commander Valtek said quickly. Complete cooperation. No territorial expansion. Reparations as requested. And the war crimes trials, Elena added pointedly. And the war crimes trials, Valtex agreed, his chest plates deflating further with each word. 3 months later, the galaxy was a remarkably different place. The former Zephyrian Empire had been restructured as the Zephyrian Democratic Federation, with human advisors overseeing the transition to what everyone diplomatically called a more cooperative form of government. Other species that had suffered under Zephyrian rule were invited to participate in the new Galactic Council, where decisions were made through voting rather than orbital bombardment. Dr. Zenwick published a groundbreaking paper titled Reassessment of Human Military Capabilities, Why Everything We Thought We Knew Was Spectacularly Wrong. It became required reading at military academies across 17 different species. The paper's introduction included the now famous line, "When a species considers mutual assured destruction a reasonable foreign policy doctrine, perhaps it's time to reconsider who the primitive ones really are." Admiral Korath found himself serving as military liaison to the new human-led peacekeeping force, a position that required him to work closely with Admiral Chen. Their first meeting reportedly involved Chen greeting Korath with the words, "So you're the genius who thought surrounding a human training colony was a good idea." Commander Valtex retired from military service and opened a small restaurant on a peaceful agricultural world, where he spent his days serving soup to travelers and telling anyone who would listen about the importance of thorough intelligence gathering. But it was Elena who became the stuff of legend. Her name was whispered in a dozen different languages across the galaxy, though the stories grew more elaborate with each telling. Some claimed she had single-handedly destroyed an entire battle fleet with nothing but a plasma rifle and sheer determination. Others insisted she could walk through solid matter and predict the future. The truth, as Elena liked to remind people, was both simpler and more terrifying. She was just a human who had gotten really annoyed. The most accurate account of the incident came from Counselor Nexus himself, who wrote in his memoirs, "We asked, who could possibly stop us? We should have been more careful about who was listening. As it turns out, the answer was simple. Anyone with enough motivation and a complete disregard for impossible odds. In other words, a human having a bad day." Years later, when young Zephyrians asked their elders about the Great Humiliation, they were told the same story Elena had lived. Never underestimate a species simply because they seem primitive. Never assume superiority based on technology alone, and never ever ask who could possibly stop us. Unless you're prepared to meet the person who walks through your door with blood on their boots and says, "Me." The galaxy learned to listen more carefully after that.